All right. My name is Nicolazzo, and I'm an assistant professor of higher education and student affairs at Northern Illinois University. I was asked to create a video about how I enact critical pedagogy in my work. And the first thing that I thought about when I was trying to piece through what critical pedagogy means to me is a comment that a faculty mentor made to me before I started teaching my first class um, at Miami University, where I completed my doctoral studies. And she said to me that there's always at least one person in the room who needs you to be you. And this was said to me at a time when I was first kind of coming into my own sense of what it meant for me to be trans and how my transness showed up um, on my body in the classroom. So kind of thinking about what effects my being trans would have on students and how to think through and negotiate that as an instructor while also paying attention to the students' learning. And I had some anxieties around what that might look like, and this mentor of mine said, you know, there's at least one student who just needs you to be you, which is something that I have taken as a little bit of a mantra, a little bit of kind of good thought as I walk into classrooms that there are lots of different students that maybe show up with marginalized identities or experiences that are different than a number of their classmates and are wondering what place they might have in the classroom space. They often might not see themselves represented through texts or readings, and so I find that my being in space and being open and honest and authentic about who I am allows people a way to enter into the classroom perhaps differently than they have in the past. The other thing that I've been thinking about in terms of how I show up in the classroom is not just how I show up through an embodied form, but how I really create my syllabi and how I show up through the syllabi for classes that I teach. And by that I mean I've worked to construct entire courses as counternarratives to dominant discourse around populations that we normatively think of when we think of college contexts and higher education. So in particular, I've constructed entire courses around marginalized populations, and I haven't waited for, let's say, a diversity, equity, and culture class to do this, but I've constructed entire research design courses around marginalized populations, which means creating a set of readings that all revolve around marginalized voices, marginalized populations, and student concerns in environments that often are made to be invisible or pushed to the margins when we think about higher education and college contexts. So for example, I taught a research design class a couple of semesters when I was a doctoral candidate at Miami University, and made sure that all of the readings, while talking about different aspects of research, all focused around student populations that were marginalized populations. That way, we were having a conversation about research while also making sure to foreground those populations that students didn't often think about or didn't often focus on. Also, I try to make sure that instead of leaving kind of liberatory or emancipatory or critical perspectives towards the end of class for like a specialized day where we think about alternative epistemologies or frameworks or paradigms, that I actually am starting to foreground classes with those liberatory frameworks and with those critical ways of thinking so that students can critique normative and historical notions of student affairs literature, college student development, those kinds of things, using those critical frameworks right from the beginning of the course. And I found that that is another way that I'm trying to really create counter narratives throughout the entire semester and have students be critical consumers of the historical texts that we're reading regardless of the topic content. So those are a couple of different ways that I'm trying to infuse critical pedagogy and really live it in the classroom spaces that I'm a part of, both in terms of my own embodied identities as well as how I construct and work alongside students to think about creating learning environments.